Hi everyone, welcome to the Kansas City Java Users Group for July. Tonight we're going to be having Dalia talk to us about migrating beyond Java 8. Dalia is a development lead for IBM's WebSphere WebSphere Migration Tools, which does deal with WebSphere Application Server. And tonight she's going to be talking to us about some of the great new features that have been added since Java 8. All right. Oops. So welcome. And I'm going to send a shout out to our sponsors, IBM, who has been hosting us now with our streaming platform, as well as providing some financial support for our group. VMware Tanzu, you may be familiar with this if you use Spring Boot. They are a sponsor for our meetup group, our meetup.com group. And YRC, even though we're not meeting physically right now, YRC is still a great sponsor for us, so we want to give them a shout out as well. So in Java news this month, let's take a look at what we have. JDK 15, now in ramp down phase 2. The first candidate's going to be available August 6th. So this is when usually the early adopters like IntelliJ will start releasing versions that give you all of that great syntactic support that is being introduced. Currently scheduled for September 15th release, and you can hit that link at OpenJDK to find out more information about what's going to be included in the release. Additionally, adopt OpenJDK, which has become kind of the de facto build of the JDK since Oracle moved it into the open source, more into the open source realm, is joining the Eclipse Foundation. So you may be familiar with the Eclipse Foundation because that is also where Jakarta EE has moved to. And Billy called out on the stream that Adopt OpenJDK is called Adoptium. Thanks, Billy, for that information. So one of the big features that everybody's looking forward to in Java 15 is Java Records. So this may look familiar to you. It's a standard JavaBean type interface, getters, setters, bunch of private fields. With Java Records, this simplifies things and takes that down to just the fields. You don't have to declare all of your getters and setters. It makes it a lot easier to use things that are just solely for wrapping data together. We have a few releases besides those, besides the JDK milestone release. Mockito 3.4 was recently released, and this adds the ability to mock static methods. So if you've been using something like PowerMock to mock static methods because Mockito doesn't support it, now Mockito does, and maybe you can get rid of PowerMock. Jakarta EE 9, milestone 1, has also recently been released. I think it was released maybe the day after our last meetup. So go check that out if you are a Jakarta EE developer. The big change that's happening here, obviously to call out, is that all of the packages are changing from JavaX to Jakarta EE. So this is something that's going to have to be addressed by everyone that wants to move to Jakarta EE 9. In other news, we have a few conferences coming up. One of the blessings, I guess, about this pandemic is that a lot of conferences are moving online. So if you didn't have a chance, if you wouldn't have had a chance to go somewhere, travel to a location to be part of a conference, now maybe you have a chance because you can do it online. So here are a few that are coming up. Got j4k.io, September 2nd and 3rd. Spring One platform, which is, I know, a big one for our group, and EclipseCon, Sorry, let me see if I can. Yeah, nope. There we go. EclipseCon coming up October 19th through 22nd. We're hosting our lightning rounds coming up October 15th. This is where everyone in the community gets a chance to give, 5, 10, 15 minutes worth of content. If you have been thinking about presenting, you want to ease into presentations, but you don't think you can fill up a full hour, this is a great opportunity to go out, get some public speaking under your belt, develop content, and understand how to present it to an audience. Sign up forms are on that Google link that's also available on our meetup site, and we will make sure we post the slides afterwards. So for anybody that wants to sign up, you can. A couple of local meetups coming up. I'm going to call out Coding and Cocktails, sponsored by Casey Women in Tech. That's July 18th, which is Saturday, from at 6 p.m. They have it scheduled from 6 to 7. I think they usually go a little after. But if you want to sign up, there's the link. And we will also be having Andrew Rubicala back in August to give his AWS and Lambda presentation over again. We had a lot of issues with the stream the first time he was here, so we are going to get that presented in a proper way for Andrew and for our community. All right, if there's anything we miss, feel free, throw it out in the comments. We're happy to hear about it and happy to have you share that with our community. Otherwise, get involved. We are always grateful for everyone that attends all of our meetups. Bring your friends. We're now on, doing live streams, so it's easier than ever to attend a meetup. You can suggest topics, speakers, or locations when we get back to actually doing in-person meetups. You can volunteer to speak. We have a pay-per-call website where you can go and submit your abstract for a presentation that you want to give. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter. We announce all of our meetups there, and we're always looking for feedback. So that Google Forms is a way for you to anonymously submit feedback to our group so that we can make it better for everyone. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dalia.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you for having me. It's definitely awesome to be invited and talking to folks that are closer to my geographical location. I was hoping to do this in person, but alas, here we are. Okay, so let's get started. It looks like you can see my screen here, so we're good to go. All right. So today I wanted to come in and talk about migrating beyond Java 8. The topic of the presentation is mainly around if you're on Java 8 and you're looking to move to Java 11 or after, what are the kind of issues you're going to run into? Because if you've seen anything online, you've seen folks that are saying, I tried going to Java 11 and I ran into this and that and this. And a lot of times it can seem a little bit scary, but I do want to show you what are the kind of issues you might be running into and what are some of the solutions to those issues. So let's get started here. A little bit about me. I am the Migration Tools dev lead at IBM. I work on WebSphere Migration Tools. We do a lot of work around migrating Java applications for big companies like big banks, retail companies, insurance companies, anyone that's using WebSphere. So we do a lot of automation around that space, mainly because we know developers can't take each app and migrate it without any help, any automation in that space. So our goal is to make migrations as painless as possible. I know if you've gone through any of those migrations, you're probably, it was very painful for you. But we try to make it so that there are no surprises as much as we can, and we do that by introducing some tooling in that space. we've had these tools around for a very long time. So we've helped developers that are trying to migrate from Java 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, and now we're helping developers move from Java 8 to 11 or 14. And I'll talk a little bit about the distinction there in a little bit. We also help developers that are moving from on-premise environments to the cloud. And maybe you're wondering, okay, what does that entail? Well, we look at their on-premise environments and we look at their applications. And if they're making things like database calls, we're going to tell them, okay, what are you going to do when you move to the cloud? Are you taking your database with you? Do you need to set up a connection back to your database? What are you doing in this area? Or if an application is writing some files to a file system and they're trying to move it into a Docker container, we're going to tell them maybe you need to use some data volumes or something along those lines. That way, you're also thinking about what changes does your application need to make in order to move to the cloud. And like I said, I work very closely with the app server development team. So WebSphere team and the OpenLiberty team, and we work with them with migrations and tooling and so on and so forth. But this presentation does not just apply to folks that are using app servers. This presentation applies to anyone that's using Java in general. So if you're using Java 8, we're going to be talking about the kind of issues you're going to be running into. So first question that I always ask myself before I start any project is, why am I doing this? So why should I migrate? I have an application. It's running on Java 8 and it's running just fine. Why should I migrate? So there are a few reasons, and different people are motivated by different reasons. The first reason is there's a lot of great new features, and Brandon hit on the records one a little bit earlier. There's tons and tons of new features. If you look at the release notes from the features from Java 9 and all the way to 14, you'll see a long list. And there's a lot of motivation there to move to the latest so you can take advantage of those features. Some of my favorite features is var. I know some people are pro or against var, but I really like var just because I do like to write concise code and not repeat myself. There are new methods in the collection classes, which are very helpful. Again, it makes it so much easier and more concise to write your code. And I really like that they made it easier to run a single file source code program. So an example of why I like these features is before in Java 8 or earlier, if I wanted to create a list, I would have to create a list like this. So I want to create a list of some states, and I have to declare my array list. I have to add each item at a time, and then I have to assign it to an unmodifiable list back to my list. Now, after Java 11, I can do this all in one line. So I went from 5 to 1, and in here, I'm taking advantage of the of method that got added. I'm putting in all my items, and then I'm taking advantage of var in this case, so I don't have to declare my array list on the left as well. So just really a simple example of why I really like some of the new features that came out in Java. And there's tons of those. You can definitely explore on it. The other reason to migrate is if you're using TLS or using any of the security features, there's always updates. But in this case, with Java 11, TLS 1.3 is a big reason to upgrade to Java 11 and beyond. Sometimes I get questions around, okay, Dalia, I have my managers, I need to convince them that I need to move Java versions. They say, I'm on Java 8 and it's working. Why migrate right now? What should I tell them? And I say, bring up the security improvements. If you're using TLS, you do want to upgrade it. Bring up the other things that came along with it when you're talking about upgrading your Java version. The other reason that motivates teams like ours is if you're a library or tooling developer, you need to keep up to date, because if you're servicing other developers, if they need to upgrade, you have to be compatible with the new Java versions. So for us, we had to keep up with the Java versions, and I'll tell you a little bit about our challenges in a little bit. But that's one of the biggest motivators. If you're a library developer for any other developers, you want to be keeping up to date on those Java versions. Lastly, of course, Java 8 is not going to be around forever. It's going to end of life soon. And the sooner that you migrate, the earlier you're going to catch some of the issues you're going to be running into. The earlier you're going to be able to take advantage of those new features. So it's definitely a one-time project that you're going to be happy that you did early on. Next question is, what is my target Java version? Before, it was a very straightforward answer. I would have spent 1 minute and told you the answer to that, but things have changed. So let's take a look at what it looked like before. So before, we had Java 6 that came out in 2006, and then 5 years later, Java 7 came out. So if you had your application running on Java 6, you just upgraded to Java 7. And then when you had your application running on Java 7, you would have upgraded to Java 8 when 8 came out in 2014. Things changed a little bit. So right now, according to a lot of surveys, a lot of developers are still on Java 8. But then you'll notice then that in September of 2017, Java 9 came out, and this concept of a short-term supported release or a feature release came about when Oracle announced that they're going to have more frequent releases. That way they get features out to the community faster. But with that came the concept of long-term supported releases and short-term supported releases. What that means is, for Java 8, you have a long-term supported release. It's going to be supported for years. But with Java 9, it's a 6-month supported release. So once Java 10 came out, Java 9 went out of support, which means if you're a Java developer on Java 9, once Java 10 came out, you needed to upgrade to Java 10. Same with Java 11. But then we had a long time since the last long-term supported release, and that's why Java 11 was declared the next long-term supported release. So if you've noticed, the line here is longer on Java 8, long on Java 11, but then they kept going with the feature releases. So we got Java 12 that went out of support when Java 13 came out, and Java 13 went out of support when Java 14 came out, and so on and so forth. So we're going to keep seeing this, and then Java 15 is going to come out, and 16 is going to come out until 17 comes out. And Java 17 is the next long-term supported release. The reason I show this is that a lot of developers out there are saying, I'm on Java 8. We're on Java 14 right now. I am way behind. And I always say, no, you're not behind. It's just that the versioning changed. So if you're looking from an enterprise customer perspective or an enterprise user perspective, you might be thinking, well, I need something that is going to be in my production for longer than 6 months, and I don't want to be upgrading every 6 months. Or you could be a developer that has their pipeline really laid out, and you can't afford to upgrade your version every 6 months. You can go either way. But for my developers, when I'm talking to folks that have thousands or hundreds of applications in their environment, I say, how about you upgrade to the latest long-term supported release? So I talk to them a lot about Java 11. I'll be talking a lot about Java 11. And then the next one that comes out, which Java 17, you can upgrade that. So my recommendation is usually run LTS in production, but keep testing with the non-LTS versions. So keep having your tests run against Java 14 right now, Java 15 when it comes out, and Java 16 when it comes out. Now that I say this, if you are comfortable with upgrading every 6 months and you have your pipeline laid out perfectly, then go ahead and pick up Java 14. Just know that if you pick up Java 14, you have to upgrade to Java 15 when it comes out in order to get support. And if you're looking for a free Java 11 build, check out Adopt OpenJDK. I know Brandon was talking about that and Billy in the comments. The name is changing, but as of now, this is the location that they're going to have the binaries. So definitely check out Adopt OpenJDK. You can get a free build there. For me, I get my build from Adopt OpenJDK. I'm running OpenJDK 11 on OpenJ9. You could also get Java 14 on Hotspot or OpenJ9. So if you're looking for a free build, check that out. All right, wonderful. We talked about the why. We talked about where we're going. Let's talk about top migration issues when you're going from Java 8 to 11 or after. When I was doing my research and talking to a lot of developers, there was 3 main categories that I identified in the field. The first category of issues is missing libraries. Those are libraries that used to come in Java SE and now no longer come with it. And they were extracted out and they were either open sourced or available elsewhere. The second category are removed APIs. Those APIs were deprecated for years and years and years, but people still use them because Java was pretty lenient about keeping those around. But starting with Java 11 and after, we're seeing a lot more APIs getting removed, especially those that were deprecated for a very long time. And we'll talk about each of those categories in detail. And then the third category is out-of-date dependencies. Just like you need to upgrade your application, the libraries had to upgrade their applications as well. And some libraries will need to be upgraded within your application. So let's talk about the first category, missing libraries. So in Java 8, you had your application. It's calling into Java SE, and it's relying on Java SE to provide certain libraries. Some of those libraries are Java EE libraries, like JAX-B, the library that converts your Java objects to XML, JAX-WS, JTA, some of the subset of JTA, Corba, JF, and common annotations. So those libraries were in Java SE, and your application would have accessed those libraries from the Java SE package that they're calling into. You would have also been able to access Java WebStart and Java FX. Starting Java 11, those libraries are no longer shipped within Java SE. Let's dig into that a little bit deeper. So the Java EE packages, so these are some of those modules that got removed. And you might be wondering, okay, what does that actually mean for me? Well, if your application is using any of these packages that I'm showing here, that means if you switch to Java 11, you're going to get a class not found because those packages are no longer provided in Java SE. One of the biggest issues that I've seen in the field, and we had issues with OpenLiberty, is the JAX-B library. A lot of our applications were using JAX-B, and we switched to Java 11, and we got a bunch of class not found. So the solution to this, you have 2 solutions. The first one is package your own JAX-B and bring it into your application as a dependency. The other thing is, if you're using any app server, that app server could be providing that library for you. So that's what we ended up doing in OpenLiberty, because this change was disruptive enough that we felt it would be useful to provide those libraries as part of the app server itself. And I included a link to what we did in that area over here. So in this case, that's how you would fix that problem. Either bring it into your application as a dependency or rely on your app server to provide it for you. For any more information about what's happening with Java EE, definitely check out the Jakarta EE website, and I know Brandon hit on that a little bit. There's a lot of work happening in that area with Jakarta E9 coming out, and we're talking a lot about the package change and the transformer. There's a transformer tool out there that I'd be happy to talk to anyone about, but there's a lot going on in that space that's very exciting. If you're wondering about Java WebStart, they did open source WebStart, and it's available if you're wanting to still be using WebStart with Java 11 or after. So check out openwebstart.com. And if you're using JavaFX, they also open source JavaFX. So you can check out openjfx.io if you want to get more information on that. So that's the first category. First category is everything that was provided in Java SE and now you need to pull into your application. Second category are things that are just gone. So they were deprecated and now you can't call them at all. You have to replace those calls. There was a lot of things that were removed, things that were deprecated since 1.4 even. And I'm going to go through those really quick. The idea is I want you to look at it and see if any of these ring a bell or you think you're using it in your application. I'll give you a little bit of information about what are some of the fixes for these, but there's definitely more information out there for you on each of these changes. So some of the packages and classes that got removed in Java 11 and later are listed over here. A lot of them, if you notice, there's the Solaris classes that got removed. So in Java 8, you would have had, for example, you're using Solaris numeric group principle. You would have had a warning in your ID. You still use it anyways because it's just a warning where you just ignore warnings. But in Java 11, you would have seen an error. You can't use that anymore. It can't find it anymore because it's no longer available. For Solaris, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much a find and replace. You're replacing Solaris with Unix. All those Solaris classes replacement is with Unix. And some of the other replacements are not as straightforward, but some of them are pretty self-explanatory. For example, the JPEG package, you have to replace it with Java Image IO instead. And some of the other packages, you have to do a little bit more work to replace those calls. The other packages that got removed are some of the internal JAXB packages. For those, if you really, really want to use them, you can use the binding packages. You could remove the internal and grab it and put it as part of your dependency and still use it. Again, you're not really supposed to be using internal APIs anyway, so it's better to just figure out how to replace them properly. Some of the peer packages got removed, and base64 decoder and encoder is one of the bigger hitters that I've seen in the field. For those, you can use the Java util base64 class instead. So an example of some of the issues you could face in this area is, I have a call here, and it's to get peer. In this case, you might be thinking, oh, I'm getting a warning because the method itself is deprecated. No, you're actually getting a warning because the object that the method is returning is deprecated, which is interesting in this case. When you switch to Java 11, that method is no longer going to be callable because that object is not available. In this case, the replacement is not a find and replace. You can achieve equivalent functionality if you call the isDisplayable method. So those are kind of a flavor of what you could be hitting when you switch to Java 11. Aside from classes and packages, you also saw a bunch of methods getting removed. So a lot of the security manager methods got removed. So again, if you're in Java 8, you would have seen a warning, no longer working in Java 11. The expectation for the security methods is to replace those with the check permission method. A lot of the changes in that I've seen have been around the finalizers and the finalize and the stop methods. So any of these cleanup resource methods that got removed, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into why are these methods getting removed. And I found this bug that explained it pretty well. And it was saying in a multi-threaded solution, when you're using stop or finalizers or any of those methods to clean up your resources, it's more likely you're going to get problems like, deadlocks and hangs and all of those things. Instead of using finalize or finalizers, you should be using things like try with resource. Really, really look at how you're cleaning up your resources, make sure that they're being cleaned up in a safe way. Same with the stop method. When you're using stop, that method is removed now. And now you want to be using, a variable to track your threads instead of relying on stop or, other ways of cleaning up your resources. Also, if you've noticed, some of the PAC 200 methods got removed, and in those cases, the methods got removed in Java 11, but these PAC 200 classes got removed altogether with Java 14 and later. So you might be able to still use some of these methods in Java 11, but those classes are not even going to be available when you go to Java 14. So I hit some of the changes in Java 11. I want to hit some of the changes that happened from Java 12, 13, and 14. So the non-LTS versions, just in case you want to target Java 14. So the security warning class got removed. You don't have to worry about that. I don't think I've seen anyone impacted by that. The ACL package got removed. In that case, you can use Java security policy instead. Like I said, PAC 200 is gone all the way. If you're using that to compress your Java application, you should use something like JPackage or something like that to do the same thing. And if you've noticed, some of the removed methods here are the finalized methods. So I suspect we're going to see more and more of those finalized methods going away. So if you have those in your application, review how you're cleaning up your resources and try to use some of the other ways to clean up your resources, like, try with resource. So those are the first two categories. Third category is out-of-date dependencies. So if you have an application that's doing anything interesting, you probably have a lot of dependencies in there. Some of the libraries that we had to update in our tool is ASM, because we do a lot of bytecode scanning. So we had to upgrade our ASM. If you're using Mockito, you're going to probably have to upgrade that. And if you're using Spring, you're probably going to have to upgrade that as well. So any of those libraries that really do a lot with bytecode, you're probably going to have to upgrade them. If you're using any build tools, so maybe you're using Gradle, maybe you're using Maven, you're probably going to have to upgrade those build tools as well. And if you're using any IDEs, I'm using Eclipse, so I had to update Eclipse in order to have it work with Java 11 or later. Using IntelliJ, VS Code, so on and so forth, you're probably going to need to upgrade your IDE. And if you're using any application servers, you're probably going to have to upgrade them as well. So OpenLiberty, JBoss, WebLogic, Tomcat, any of those app servers. So my advice is take this time to upgrade your dependency. I know people wait until, things go out of support or anything like that, but I figured if you're doing some testing on your application when you're upgrading it to Java 11 or later, might as well upgrade some of those dependencies and just get all that testing over with. And definitely there's a lot of good automation tools out there that you could set up to upgrade your dependencies for you so you don't have to do it manually each time. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. All right, so Dalia, why did you not talk about modularity? What about modularity? In case you're not familiar, modularity is the idea of having Java break up its packages into different modules. And the reasoning for that is if you have an application and the application depends on only 2 packages out of how many modules that Java has, you don't want to pull all of Java with you into something like a container or anything like that. Just because you want something a little bit more lightweight, you want something that is not going to bloat your container. Now, the issue with modularity is that when you're migrating, your Java 8 applications has no concept of modularity. So it hasn't declared those dependencies. And when you move to a Java 11 environment or later, you end up running into issues. Luckily, there is a kill switch and it's on by default. This is the illegal access property and it's set to permit. I have heard that it's going to be set to deny by default, maybe in Java 16 or later, but it has not yet. But the idea here is by default, if you upgrade to Java 11 and you haven't changed this property, it's going to be set to permit. I would recommend leave it as is. Don't change the default for now. And just migrate to Java 11, keep that kill switch on, fix everything else with your application, and then think about what you want to do with modularity. I've seen folks in the field that are using Java 11 or later and not taking advantage of modularity at all. In fact, I actually was looking at the JVM ecosystem report for this year, and they were asking, are you using or are you planning on using Java modules in your Java applications? The result was 64% of people said no, and 29% said we plan to, 7% said they already are. And it's pretty much reflecting of the conversation I've had with a lot of developers. Some developers tried to break up their application into modules and they weren't very successful. So said, all right, we're not going to do that anymore. So, don't let the idea of modularity stop you from moving to Java 11 or after. You can definitely move and not worry about modules and breaking up your Java application into modules. All right, so what tools can I use to make my migration easier? I've hit a lot of the changes that happened, and you're probably wondering, all right, I don't know what my application is even using. Maybe they're using some of these classes, maybe they're not. What tools are out there to help me migrate and migrate easier? So some of the tooling I'm going to talk about today, the first one is the application binary scanner tool. So this is the tool that my team develops. It's a command line tool. It's available for free for personal and commercial use. The purpose of this tool is it scans your application bytecode, and if it sees any of those classes I talked about in your application, it will flag it and tell you, by the way, you have this issue, here's how you fix it. And it will include resources and examples of how to fix those issues. So when I show folks these list of items, I tell them, well, you might not even need to worry about any of these, so only worry about it if the tool flags that you have an issue in that area. And I've included a link to the tool and included a link to the documentation. These slides are definitely going to be available after I'm done here. Second tool I want to hit on is JDEPS. JDEPS is a tool that's actually shipped with the JDK, starting, I think, JDK 8. I think that's when the first time JDEPS made it. And it's packaged in the JDK itself. Now, the one caveat I always want folks to remember is if you're running JDEPS, make sure you're running JDEPS that's packaged with your target Java. Because if you can think about it, if you're coming from Java 8, you're going to Java 11. If you run the JDEPS in Java 8, it's not going to know anything about what happened in Java 11. So when you're running JDEPS, make sure that you're running the JDEPS in Java 11 if you're going there, or in Java 14 if you're going there. And the relevant option for JDEPS is JDK internals. When I was looking at JDEPS and seeing what kind of issues it highlights, it looks like it really concentrates on those internal APIs that you're using. A lot of times it didn't flag some of the issues like the Java EE packages, some of the methods that got removed. So what we ended up doing with our binary scanner tool is if we see you using any internal APIs, we will recommend running JDEPS. But if you're not using any internal APIs, we won't even recommend running JDEPS because you're probably not going to get any value from running it. And I'll show you that in a little bit too. I attached a link to the documentation to the presentation here. The last tool I'm going to talk about is just any kind of tool that helps you automate those dependency updates, because that third category is hard to deal with. So if you have a process that automatically brings in new dependencies and upgrades them for you, then it's going to be a lot easier than doing it each time manually. With this, you want to make sure your testing is on point. Your automated testing is good because you don't want to just upgrade dependencies without doing proper testing, but it definitely makes your life easier because you don't have to do it manually yourself. An example of that is Dependabot, and I'll show you that in a little bit as well. All right, time for the demo. So let's let me pause here and make sure there's not any questions in the chat. And Brandon can tell me. Oh, I can't hear you, Brandon. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it looks like there is a little bit of a delay. I actually just posted a question out there. Does the binary scanner tool just cover the class files in a jar, or does it include dependencies on the class path as well?
It's only the class files in the jar. So that's a great question. We've had questions about that, and it's kind of a hard problem for us to solve because how do you really detect that? So we rely on folks to point us at the right place to find those class files. Great question there. All right, awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah, Billy had a question. Any tips on setting up pipelines to bring in different versions of the JDK?
Yeah, that's a great question, Billy. When do you recommend to bring in new JDKs? If I'm going to be completely honest, we are very focused on Java 11, and we don't bring in the test at the end of the quarter. We do test with Java 14 or 13 or so on and so forth. With our pipeline, we use Jenkins. So in that area, I would probably say there's probably a very good way to do it, but I'm not going to guess. But my recommendation is usually focus on running with Java 11 and 17, just because to me, upgrading every 6 months is just not very realistic. But for other folks, maybe it is from my perspective. Maybe someone on the chat has some good tips. Feel free to share it there. Other questions? And to clarify, we do run our tests every time new Javas come out just to make sure the tools still run with the latest Javas. But as far as like really telling people to use those Javas, I just I can't do it in good conscience.
I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so if you want to continue, you're welcome to.
All right. Well, and if you have more questions, just post them in the chat. All right. So next is let's do a quick demo. Okay. So what I wanted to do for my demo is let's exit here. I wanted to show you an application, a very simple application I built that kind of is supposed to show you what can happen when your application is upgraded to Java 11. So I have a really simple app here. Let me show you this app. So I have an application that has a weather object. This is a JAXB object. It has a city, a state, a country, a forecast, and I'm using this object to convert my Java object to XML. And in this case, I live in Rochester, Minnesota, and it's super duper warm right now. Not like Texas though, but it is warm. I write out my object to XML, and I wanted to make it a little bit interesting. So I'm encoding my forecast and decoding my forecast. So here's my class, very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my command line up. I'm going to show you what version I'm running. So I'm running Java 8 right now. And I'm going to just run my application. So I'm using Gradle in this case. If you're using Maven, it's pretty much the same thing. I just wanted to play around with Gradle a little bit, so I took the opportunity to do that with this application. So I ran my application. It printed out my XML for the weather object. So Rochester, Minnesota. It's super warm. And it took my forecast, it encoded it, took my encoded forecast and decoded it. Like I said, it's really simple. Your app is probably not doing something so simple, but just want to show you a quick app here. So next step is I want to switch to Java 11 and just try to run my application. So I am switching to Java 11. This is just a script that I wrote because I didn't want to set my path and all that stuff. And what I'm going to do here is going to show you the version that I'm running. So right now I'm running with Java 11. In your case, maybe you're switching to 14 or whatever Java you're on, you're switching to it. Next step, I'm just going to run and see what happens. All right, I ran it with Java 11 and I got a bunch of errors. So let's lots and lots of errors. And you can kind of see some of the classes it's complaining about. And at this point, what you can do is go through each of these errors, Google away and find out what the solution is, or you can use a tool like the tool that my team develops, which is a binary scanner, and scan your application and see if the tool provides any insight on how you can fix these problems. So let me show you that. So the binary scanner is available on WASDev. Like I said, it's free for personal and commercial use. And once you download it, it's just a jar, and it downloads an installer jar that you run Java-jar on, and it installs the binary scanner. So it's very simple, takes 2 minutes, and you can just run against your application. We have some doc here, so if you're interested, and we do support different languages, so check those out. But if you're interested in looking at the doc and what else we do with the binary scanner, there's lots we do with the binary scanner. It's over here. But the idea is you install the binary scanner and then you run the binary scanner against your application. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do is run my binary scanner. Where is it? Right here. So let's get the path over here and then binary scanner. And the binary scanner takes in any jars, any wars, and any ears. So if you have a war or an ear or a jar, it's going to work for any of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point it at my build directory because that's where my jar is right now. So the Java 11 demo jar. And then I'm going to tell the binary scanner what exactly I want it to scan for. So I wanted to analyze Java SE. The reason why this is important is because the binary scanner could be scanning for lots and lots of things. It could be scanning for cloud issues. It could be scanning for Java EE changes. It can be scanning for a lot of other issues. So it's important to tell it what exactly you're looking for from the scan. And then you need to tell it what source Java you're coming from. So in my case, I'm coming from IBM 8. Someone might be coming from Oracle 8. We also support, if you have Oracle 6 or 7 or whatever Java version you're running with, you just need to tell the binary scanner which version it is, and it will scan for all of the changes. For example, if you're coming from 6, it'll scan for changes that happen from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, and then 8 to 11. In my case, I'm coming from IBM 8, so that's what I'm going to say. And then the target Java for me is Java 11. We just added support for 14, so you can also do that. Now, the caveat is once 15 comes out, we are also having to update our tool as soon as we can. So there might be a little bit of a delay with the Java 15 rules, but even if Java 15 comes out, you can still use the 14 option to detect everything that happened until that point.
Hey, Dalia, can I interrupt
you
for just a second?
Yes.
We got a question on the stream. Can you run it against dependent jars?
So can you run it against the jars that your application depends on? Is that the question?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, So yes, you can. We actually exclude that by default. And the reason we do that is because a lot of times the binary scanner is going to find a lot of issues in the library, and sometimes they're actual issues and sometimes they're kind of informational issues. So a lot of times we even exclude that altogether because you can't really do a lot with that information. You can scan it against any kind of jar you want, but my recommendation is not really to take that result too seriously, because a lot of times it's that library developer's job to upgrade, and they will upgrade it the way that they want to do it so that they can be compatible with Java 11. So the answer is yes, you can, but it's probably not the best idea, because it will come up with some issues, even though maybe it's not really real issues, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to give some follow-up on that, and we can have additional discussion at the end. But that's one of the things where folks have come to me and said, well, I want to run it against my dependency to see if I'm actually going to have any issues in production with this dependency. Well, I say, yeah, but our binary scanner is going to be super duper detailed. It's going to give you everything and anything, but then you go and run it against production, and maybe it runs, maybe it doesn't. A lot of times the best thing to do is to just upgrade your library and not depend on the report itself. Depend on the library developers to tell you whether or not that library is compatible with Java 11 or not. And I hope that answer makes sense.
Follow-up question on there. How do you know what JDK version a jar supports?
A lot of times I have to visit the website and look at the releases. So with ASM, we had to look up what exact Java version or what exact library version supports Java 11. There might be a better way to do this. I have always wondered if there's like some master list out there somewhere that has that information. There might be something like that, but a lot of times I just go and actually double check on the library compatibility and make sure that the library says, yes, this version is for Java 11 or later, or Java 14. And that's, by the way, that's one of the reasons folks are more reluctant to move to the latest Java version, not because they can't handle the changes themselves, it's because the dependencies they rely on, a lot of them just haven't been able to keep up. So they ask me often, okay, well, I'm ready to move, but my dependencies aren't. And a lot of times I don't have an answer for that, because if your dependencies can't keep up with the Java versions, you really don't have a lot of options. If that, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, let's run the binary scanner and see what it shows us. So just it ran really quick because it's a really small application. So what's going to happen here is you're going to run the binary scanner against your binary. So your jar, your ear, your war. You're going to tell it where you're coming from, where you're going to. Funnily enough, that question was a perfect timing, because down here, we're printing off a message that says, here are the packages we're excluding by default. These are the third-party packages, typically, that we don't want to scan because you're going to get a lot of hits that you can't really do anything with. So we're going to exclude them by default. Now, the caveat here is if your company starts with any of these names, those packages are going to be excluded by default. So you check out this list, make sure your company name doesn't start with any of these. For example, a lot of our packages start with IBM, so I have to override it. But if it doesn't start with any of these, like org or whatever it is, and it's most likely won't, then you don't have to bother with this. But just in case, I do like to highlight it and say, if your company name starts with any of these names, you can just use the include packages or exclude packages option. I recommend the include packages option with your company name to say, definitely scan those packages for me. If again, you don't have to worry about it most likely, but I do want to point that out. What's going to happen here, it's going to scan your app. You're going to see this line until it's done. Now, if your application is tiny like mine, it's gonna run really quick. But if you have lots and lots and lots of classes, it will take some time. So just be patient and let it run. It's going through each and every file in your jar and scanning it for any issues. So sometimes it does take some time. And then after it's done, it's going to print out a report, an HTML report, and it's going to open it up for you. So let's take a look at that. Here's the report that came up when I scanned my application. At the very top, it tells me the source and target here. So source is Java 8, target is Java 11. We just set the app server to be the same, so you don't have to worry about app server. Again, you don't have to be using an app server to run this tool at all. It's just looking for any references in your bytecode, so don't worry about app servers at all. Excluded packages, all good here. So looks like it found 3 issues with 6 hits. So the 3 categories of issues we're going to find, the first is severe issues. Severe issues are ones that are most likely going to break your application when you migrate. Warnings are for things that might or might not. I want to show it to you, and I want you to read the help and see if that's likely going to be an issue for you or not. Informational are issues that are most likely not going to be a problem. A lot of times, the purpose of this informational rules are to tell you, okay, here's the kind of issues you might be looking for. How about you, if you run into this issue in production, you can come back to the report and read about how you can solve it or anything like that. So again, informational things you could probably ignore most of the time, but severe and warnings you definitely want to pay attention to. In general, read the report and check it out either way.
Hey, Dalia, before you exit the report here, would you be able to just increase your font size a little bit? It's a little hard to see on the stream.
Yes. Great point.
Thanks.
And let me get rid of my bookmarks so you don't have to stare at those. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Awesome. All right. So let's take a look at the kind of issues it found. First issue is do not use APIs from the Sun package. And you might look at this and be like, I don't know what you mean by that. With each issue that we have, we include some help and resources on what you need to do. So in this case, we're telling you you're using some Sun packages. Those are internal and you're not really supposed to be using them. A lot of those have been taken out. If you're using base64 encoder or decoder, those are removed. Instead, use Java util base64 class. So the nice thing about this is if you're using any of these, you can read the help and learn more about it. But if you're not using some of these classes or packages, you don't have to worry about it. And then you might be wondering, okay, where exactly am I using these? Down below, we show you where exactly we found the package reference with the line number. And some of these sometimes are a little bit off because you're using ASM to scan the bytecode, but it's really close to the area that you're going to find the hit that we found. So it looks like it found a bunch of the internal Sun packages, and it's telling me you should go ahead and fix that. The second thing that it found is, looks like I'm using JAX-B. So this is the binding. So the binding packages. So the ones that are, I was telling you I'm using that weather object and it's using JAX-B. So it looks like it found it. There's a bunch of help down here on how to fix it. If you're using OpenLiberty, all you need to do is just enable the JAX-B feature. You don't need to do anything else. If you're not using an app server at all you need to do is bring it into your dependency list and include it in your application. And again, it's going to tell you where it found it. In this case, I only have it highlighted once. And you might be wondering, okay, why? I'm using it all over the place. The reason we're flagging it just once is because once you fix it once and you bring in the right libraries, that problem goes away. So you no longer need to worry about it. So in this case, you're only going to see one flag. And then the next thing that we flagged was running JDEPs. So it looks like we found that you're using some internal APIs and we're recommending you run JDEPs. So in here, we're going to tell you more about JDEPs and tell you how to run it. And again, we're going to tell you where we found that, that hit. All right, so here's the report. We found out what it is. So let's start and look at the very first issue that it found. All right, so it looks like it found a hit in my app class around line 56. So let's go back to here. All right, and line 56. So it doesn't like this. And then some of the other hits were like 46. They're kind of out of order, but the idea is it looks like it doesn't like any of these calls. And in this case, I'm running with Java 8 here, and I like to see my errors right in my IDE. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my build path. And I'm going to switch it to Java 11. That way I can see the errors right in front of me. All right, so it looks like I have some errors here, and all over the place. But let's solve the first problem that we found. It looks like I'm using base64 encoder. Let's take a look at the report. I should be using Java util base64 instead. So let's do that. I did some research already, and turns out I need to use base64 and call the encoder class here, and then call base64.getEncoder to get equivalent functionality. And you'll notice that the method call has changed. In this case, I'm assigning it back to a string, so I need to call encode to string instead of encode. So that's how I'm going to fix that problem. The other problem down below is also base64 decoder. So in this case, I'm going to call the base64.getDecoder method to get the decoder, and then I'm going to call decode because, like I said, the method changed slightly. And this is how I'm going to get the same functionality I had before. And you'll notice that I'm getting an error down here because this method no longer throws the exception. So I'm going to get rid of this exception. Going to reformat here because I can't stand not formatted code. And all right, so that's done. Let's make sure all the imports are good to go. So I'm going to remove those. And we got rid of that problem. All right, next problem. JAX-B. So I'm using JAX-B, and notice the problem manifests itself the same way it manifests in the encoder case, but JAX-B is a different fix. So I'm using JAX-B here, but it can't find it because Java SE is no longer shipping it. So what I'm going to do is go to my greater build file, or in your case, it's going to be your Maven file. And I'm going to pull in JAX-B. So this is the coordinates for my JAX-B library. So in this case, it's the Jakarta package. And I'm going to save that. So that way it pulls it into my application. And I'm going to go back to my application. Oh, it's still having a problem. It's probably because I haven't refreshed my dependencies. So let's do that and see if it likes it now. All right. So now it's liking what I have. All right, so that fixed that second problem. Third problem is just telling me to run JDEPs. So let's run JDEPs and see what it provides. Again, if you're running JDEPs, make sure you're running JDEPs that's in the target. So in this case, I'm running Java 11, and I'm going to run the JDEPs that comes with Java 11. So JDK internals. And similar to the binary scanner, you're going to point it at your jar. In case of JDEPs, they don't actually accept years and words, so you're going to have to expand that if you want to scan those. But the binary scanner does accept those, so just a little bit of difference there. So I'm going to run it against my jar and see what it provides for me. All right, so here's the output. It's a little bit harder to read. So it looks like it found in my app, it found that I'm using base64 decoder and encoder. And then it looks like it's suggesting down here the replacements, which is Java util base64. This is already information that was provided in the binary scanner, so we don't really need to do anything with it. But in case that you have other internal APIs, JDEPs might provide some extra suggestions that the binary scanner maybe didn't provide. So make sure you run JDEPs just in case there's a little bit more info there that you could benefit from. All right.
Hey, Dalia, one more question.
Sure.
If your application's targeting different environments, running different versions of Java, can you use the binary scanner tool to make sure that your application that maybe you wrote with Java 11 is compatible to run in a Java 8 JRE?
Ah, that's really interesting. Not necessarily with the binary scanner, but we always have our compatibility in for our project set to even Java 6 for our case, because we have folks that run our tool with Java 6 itself. So not with the binary scanner, but with your IDE and your build tools, you can set your compatibility level to be Java 6, Java 7, or Java 8. And that's extremely important when you're servicing other developers, not to set it to something too high, because then it starts breaking for them. That's a great question there.
Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. All right, so ran JDEPs over here, found base64. We don't need to do anything with that, so we're just gonna leave it alone. So it looks like we solved everything the binary scanner told us about. So what I'm gonna try to do here is I'm gonna just try to run it again and see what happens. So I'm rebuilding my application and I'm running it with Java 11 after I fix those problems and seeing what happens. Moment of truth. Awesome. Looks like it actually ran and we're good to go. So that's a very, very simplified version of what you're going to have to do when you're migrating your application. It's probably going to take some iterations. It's not going to be a, super straightforward. But like I said, some tooling can really help with this process. And I do want to show a couple of things before we wrap up. I did upload all of this code to a GitHub repo here, so that if anyone wants to check it out and just kind of play with it, happy to do that. And then I want to show Dependabot. So I set up my repo with Dependabot. And what Dependabot does is it looks at my Gradle file or your Maven file, looks at all your dependencies, and if it notices that there is a new version of that dependency available, it creates a pull request for you to upgrade that version to the later version. And you can even configure it to say, I only care about major version or minor versions or anything like that, but it makes updating your dependencies a lot easier. So, for example, in my repo, it saw that I have, a JUnit dependency, and it created a pull request, and all I needed to do was just merge it. So it's pretty nice that way. And I like tooling that kind of makes my life a little bit easier here. So that's Dependabot. So let's take a look at what are the next steps. I hope you didn't peek it. I should have made sure to go and step back here. So next steps, what should I do now once I leave this presentation? Step 1, just try running your application with Java 11. Sometimes you're going to be just successful. Maybe your application runs on Java 11 already and you don't have to do anything else. In that case, just skip the next 2 steps. In case that it doesn't run and you do have issues, you can either debug the issues yourself or run a binary scanner tool like the one I showed against your jar, your war, or ear. I included the command that I just ran over here, so you can just copy paste it for your application. And I also included the help command in case you're curious about all the options that are available. You want to read your report and fix your application similar to what I just showed, and try to run it again, see if it fixes it, try to run it again, see if it fixes it, so on and so forth. Hopefully it's not too many iterations, but hopefully this will trim down on the number of times that you're going to try something and see if it works. Step 4 is update your dependencies and tools as needed. Step 4 could be step 1 or 0, because sometimes you even need to upgrade your tooling before you do any of this. So definitely be on the lookout if you need to upgrade your Gradle or Maven or your IDE or anything like that. And step 5 is, of course, run your test, run your automated test, run your manual test, run all your tests, and make sure your application is running just fine, and you're covering all the code path that you have in your application. Lastly, celebrate. If you do get your application successfully running on Java 11, make sure you celebrate. It's a great accomplishment. It's a little bit painful, but now it's done and you can move forward. And if you run any of the tooling that I talked about, please let me know how it went for you. I get really useful, really helpful feedback from the field about the kind of issues that people actually ran into, and especially things that were problems in the production environment, but the tool didn't catch it. Those feed right into the tool. I actually got something a couple of days ago from someone that ran the tool to migrate to Java 11, and they were telling me, oh, by the way, I ran into this problem in production environment. It was around the compile method in the pattern class, and I had this issue, and I was like, oh, great, let me create an issue and add that back into our tooling so that the next person that's migrating can benefit from that. So if you run the tools, please let me know if you run into any issues, or if it worked for you, what kind of feedback or anything that happened for your migration. I would love to hear it. Some helpful links I wanted to include in here. First link is basically the written version of what I walked through for my demo. I know some people do better with blogs, so I included the blog post of how to migrate to Java 11. And then I included a link to the binary scanner, the long link to the binary scanner, and you can definitely check out the documentation that goes with that. I also included a link to a source scanner tool that our team also develops. The source scanner tool is an Eclipse plugin. So if you're an Eclipse IDE user, definitely check out this plugin. What it's going to do is it's going to take your source code, scan it within Eclipse, and it's going to highlight issues right within your IDE. So you don't have to do the comparison between the line numbers. You can double click and go to that flag. I can even show it to you if we have some time at the end and people are interested. But definitely, if you're using Eclipse, check out that tool. And then I included a link to the Java 11 demo GitHub repo in case you want to check that out. The JVM ecosystem report for 2020, I thought that was a very interesting read, so definitely check that out. And then the Oracle Java SC support roadmap. This is where all those dates about support are at. I get a lot of questions on those, so check out that page to get more information about the dates. And I know a lot of folks are looking at how to migrate from Oracle Java to adopt OpenJDK just for their companies, and they're interested in that. So I found this article on how to do that and some information around that space. So that was interesting as well. If you want to know more about what OpenLiberty had to do to migrate to Java 11, I included a blog post by Andy Gibir around that area as well. Just an interesting read there. And that's all I wanted to show today. So any questions or comments or thoughts?
Yeah, we got a couple of questions on this stream. So first question, what upcoming feature are you most looking forward to in Java 15 and forward?
All right. People might think it's silly, but there's a null pointer exception improvement that maybe it already made it in there, but where it tells you exactly the variable that you got a null pointer on, and that's one of the most requested things that I've had, because a lot of times you get the null pointer exception and you don't know which variable it is if you're calling 3 different variables, and just having that will be an amazing improvement for me. But of course, the normal records I think are going to be amazing. I love concise code, so the less I have to write, the better. Other things, I think those two are mainly it. But I've seen a lot of good stuff, so definitely looking forward to what else they have in mind.
All right, next question. What does the analyze Java SE parameter do in the binary scanning tool, and why is it not the default?
All right, great question. So before I started presenting, there was no -- analyze Java SE option at all. And the reason I added this option is because I used to have to say my source app server is Liberty and my target app server is Liberty. And a lot of folks saw that and were like, oh, I'm not even using an app server. Why do I have to specify that? Well, this tool is really, really focused on application server migration. And that's the main reason for this tool. It's not just about Java SE. It's like a very tiny portion of all the rules that come with this tool. It's a lot of how do you move from WebSphere traditional to Liberty, how to go from Java EE 6 to EE 8, how do you go from Java SE 8 to 11, how do you go from on-premise environments to cloud environments. The tool does a lot, so I had to add a generic way to specify, I don't care about any of the other rules. I want you to just look for Java SE, and it's mainly for folks like the folks on the call that don't run any app servers and still want to use the tool to look for issues around their Java applications. So that's a little bit of history on why I added that option. I actually went back to my team after a conference and I was like, people were really getting confused by this. Can we add this option so that they don't have to worry about app servers at all? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So I added it.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in on the stream, so thank you so much for being here today and presenting to us. Dalia's contact information is up on the screen, so if you have questions, we will get links posted out to your GitHub, and will you be able to make the presentation available as well for reference? Dalia?
Awesome.
Sorry. Will you be able to make the presentation available for us for reference as well?
Oh yes. Actually, I can even link to it right now if you'd like to put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Let me do that. I am bringing the option up. And if anyone has more questions while I'm doing that, there it is. And I'm gonna put it in the private chat for you so you can copy it over to YouTube.
All right, and I will post this out in the YouTube comments.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It was great. And if anyone has questions or goes through it and wants to give me their experience and tell me more about what happened, I would love to hear it. It's always great to hear about actual real life experiences on the field and what people actually run into.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.
Thanks. Bye.